Welcome back to Mr. Walter's Woodshop. Today we're talking about routers. So we have 3 routers in our shop. We have some router tables, we have some trim routers, and we have some just regular routers. So with those three different types, there's certain ways to use them, how to use them safely, and we'll go over all that. First router we'll talk about is the trim router. So the trim router you're going to be using 1/4" bits on, because that's the size of the collet. So you're not going to use that strong, and you're not going to cut as deep with something like this. Most likely you're just going to be using it for the edges of a piece of wood, whether you're rounding it over, adding a chamfer bit to it, something like that. So to adjust this machine, if you're changing the bit, what you can do is you can loosen this up, and you can actually take this part off. And then change the bit, so like that, and then just put it back on. And then once it's on, it kind of clicks into this black collar. This twists so you can raise or lower the blade edges to where you want it to be. And then you would just latch this down, lock it into place, and it's good. Both of them have on and off switches. You always want to make sure that they're in the off switch when they get plugged in. And then when you set it down, when you're done using it, you never want to set it down on top of the router bit. So most of the time I just put it upside down. You can technically put it on the side like that, but you never want to set it directly onto a bit. This one doesn't have a bit, so I can store it like that. But majority of the time, I just put it upside down because I know it's flat on the top of it, and I know the router bit is up. Obviously, you got to be careful with the router bit and cutting edges face up. This router is very similar to how you adjust it. We have a couple that have latches and a couple like this that have little screws. So you would just loosen the screw lock, and then this whole base plate with both handles and so on will turn. So you can adjust the height by twisting the entire thing, and then you always want to make sure that you lock it back in place and it's locked tight. You can try to change it, and you can, and then you're good. With this one, it's a lot heavier duty, it's a lot stronger, so you need to have 2 hands. There's 2 handles on it for a reason, so you want to make sure you're holding it securely with both hands, and that way you can use it that way. Also, because you're using both hands, usually when you're using this one, your piece of material should be latched down or pressed down somewhere, so it can't move when you use this. So the routers are only as good as the bits that you get for them. So there's lots of different bits you can get. You can get very expensive bits, you can get really cheap bits, but I suggest if you have a router, just go on Amazon or get a variety pack. That way you can just try out some different things and use it. But the main 2 that we use in our class is a round over bit or any kind of edge bit, or the cutting bits where you're just cutting a straight slot or a square. Now they make bits that you can use to make countertops. They make tongue and groove bits and other things like that. So we will probably use the tongue and groove bit, but only when we're making the cabinets towards the end of the year. So with the edge cutting bit, if you look up close to it, you can see it has a bearing on it. So there's cutting edges here and here, and then there's a bearing on the top. This bearing does not allow the wood to go through this piece. So the wood has to stop up against it, which is why I can cut all the edges with something like this. Now with a bit like this, there is nothing to stop the wood, so you can technically go in any direction, anything, and it's going to cut the wood through. But usually when we're using this, we're also using it on the table, and we have a fence that we can push up against it, so we're making a straight line perfectly through our piece of wood. Alright, so if you're over here, now we're working on the router table. So the router table, you want to adjust the height to how it is. So let's just say I want to cut about half the thickness of this piece of wood out and have a groove that goes through it. Okay, I'm going to start by making a bunch of small, shallow cuts. You don't want to try to cut half of this piece of wood all at once. So you want to go through multiple shallow passes. So I'm just going to do very little bit, probably going to be 3 or 4 until you get it done. So here's how that looks. Okay, so just like the miter saw and other saws, you want to make sure you're pushing down and up against the fence when you're using a fence. This is a cutting bit, so that fence is going to hold it so we make a perfectly straight groove all the way through. First cut, again, it's just a shallow pass through. I want it to be about halfway through, so I'm probably going to raise it up a little bit and do 2 or 3 more cuts. So raising it the same way as you do on the handheld, it's just upside down. So you're just going to twist it, raise it up a little bit. Goes all the way through it. It's about half the thickness of the wood that I needed. And again, you can see that I used the push block to push it through. I don't want my hands coming anywhere near that router bit because it's just a spinning blade, that's all it is. So I use, again, push block for safety. My hand never came really anywhere inside this red circle, and that's how it should be to keep your fingers safe, and then you have your grooves cut.